Well, good morning, everyone. It is now 9:31. I'd like to call our Left 2 board meeting to order. Today's November 16th. Let's go ahead and start off with a moment of silence and remember our fallen brothers and sisters. All right, thank you very much. Looking at our agenda, our first item of business is the approval of our minutes from the September and October meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motions made and seconded to adopt the September and October meeting minutes. Is any discussion? Trying to watch the screen, make sure I don't miss anything. Seeing nobody on the screen. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. Mr. Nelson, number 2.
Number 2, it is our pleasure today. As you know, annually, the Washington State Investment Board gives a presentation about their management of the Left 2 pension fund as part of the commingled trust fund. Today, we have the new executive director, or new to us anyway, executive director of the SIB, Allison Tucker, here in person to do that presentation. Welcome, Allison.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? I think I know where to register my complaints if the technology isn't working correctly. Thank you for having me this morning. It is a privilege for me to be able to represent the Washington State Investment Board. I think some of you may know me or may have met me before. Some of you may not have. I have been with the State Investment Board since November of 2009. So that means I'm just coming up on 13 years. This is the 4th position I've held within the Washington State Investment Board. So it's truly been a remarkable place for me to have made a substantial chunk of my career. I am born and raised in Olympia. I've not lived in Olympia my entire life. I spent 16 years way up north in Seattle, and where I went to school and worked for a few years and made my way back home where my immediate family lives to live this kind of life. So anyway, that's a little bit of background on me. That did not prepare those remarks. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide here, if I can figure it out. Look at that. Okay, I think you know us pretty well, but there are some updated statistics here I just want to call your attention to. We are now, as of September 30th, about $176 billion assets under management. That makes us one of the largest public pension systems by asset size in the country. Along with Left Plans 1 and 2, we also manage 15 other pension funds, along with labor and industries funds and some other funds that I'm sure you're aware of. Our mission is stated there. We like to remind everybody that we are here. We're singularly focused on managing investments. We think we do that with integrity, prudence, and skill. And our fiduciary duty is to our fund participants and beneficiaries. And we aim to maximize return at a prudent level of risk. That needs little reminder, I think, to this board, but from time to time, people, I think, need that assurance that that is where we focus and how we manage these funds. At the bottom there, it's just meant to demonstrate that we have a globally diversified portfolio. You can think of us as owning the market, more or less. We're in 93 different countries, a lot of different currencies. No cryptocurrencies. I will get to that near the end of the presentation because that may be on your mind. And over 17,000 investment holdings. So pretty complex. I think you're more familiar than most with our governance structure, but I thought I'd give you the update on new members. So Liz Lewis in the middle column there on the far right, she is our newest board member. She joined us just a few months ago, and she's representing the school employees based out of the east side of Washington. And then before Liz, Treasurer Pelliciotti is our second to newest member. All the other folks you would have seen in the update for several years before. We do consider our board makeup and our board members, who seem to be year after year very engaged in the work that we do, which of course is a requirement of good governance. We consider our board structure and makeup a key strength for the Washington system. David Nuremberg, it sounds like you remember him. Yes, he is now our most tenured board member. He earned that title when George Maston retired from our board. 16 years. Yes. Yes. So on the five financial advisors that we're referring to, those people have specialties in areas, and they provide guidance and counsel, as you know, to the non-voting or to the voting board members. We have a real estate expert in Ada Healy, who is the head of proper real estate for the Paul Allen Trust, Vulcan. We have a fixed income expert in Mary Pugh, who runs a firm out of Seattle that has been voted a few times as one of the best companies to work for. And Bill Longbreak is a risk expert and an economist. And I think I have forgotten one of our non-voting board members. Who did I forget? George Zinn, thank you. George Zinn, the former Microsoft or Microsoft treasurer, so he's a corporate treasury expert. All right, thanks for that. Yeah, please do not tell anybody I've left out one of our board members. If only I knew how to reverse the slides. I do not know how to do that. So this is an update on the size of the organization. We're about 113 people plus a few vacancies. Half of which are dedicated to the frontline investment management, picking the managers and securities. About the other half is dedicated to executing on those strategies. All of our staff are expected to have investment competence, and we spend time developing people to bring their knowledge forward. The big goal this year was to return to office safely, and we started that. I won't call it an experiment because I think the team refers to it as a mandate, but we asked everybody to come back 60% of the time on premise, and that decision was made based on talking to peer funds, reading, what other big banks and others are doing, other agencies are doing, and then of course talking directly to staff to find out what they wanted. And it actually did run the spectrum. You hear the line that nobody wants to come back. That wasn't quite true. There were a few people who didn't want to come back. It was more about how do we come back, what's expected, what kind of flexibility can I retain, and also this boardroom that we're in took some investment to be able to make it workable in a hybrid environment. We think it's going great. If you guys feel otherwise, please let us know so we can make adjustments. But very happy to be back as of September 12th. And we promised that in 6 months we would check in with everybody and see what we needed to do from here. Obviously, if health and safety concerns crop up, we will have to make an adjustment. You all know this slide well. I'll just say, along with LEF 1 and 2, we have 15 other retirement funds. On this slide, the bottom right hand shows the other funds. There's the Washington Cares Long-Term Services and Support. I would just highlight for you, while most of what we do is investments on behalf of retirement funds, when this program is enacted, we are listed as the investment manager, and it, depending on how it shapes up, could be quite a sizable pool of assets that will have our time and attention in addition to the other things we do. So this is the commingled trust fund, which is, I know you all know, this is where your plans have their assets invested. I'm going to focus on the right-hand part of this chart. So the upper chart shows 10 years of annual data ended in June, plus 1 quarter for fiscal year to date 2023. At the far right, Most of the years here, you'll see that we have out-earned the actuarial rate of return assumption for the commingled trust fund as a whole. 2021 is quite a standout of a year. I don't quite know what to say about that, except that the market was exuberant and we participated in that. I would point out that the 2022 number of 5.4% is it's better than a nice return. I think the average pension fund was probably negative over that period. I know of at least one other fund that produced a higher number than we did for the year, but I don't think there are that many of them. So I think you can feel very good about that return. What is benefiting us in a very choppy market like the one we're in is our commitment to the private markets. So those have slower appraisal and valuation processes, takes longer for bad news to work its way through the system. One could say that public markets can overreact to news and private markets can underreact to news, with the true value being somewhere in between on any given quarter. So we would expect those valuations to come down over time. At the same time, they're making adjustments within the asset classes themselves. So should be a more moderated effect. Right, dropping underneath the bar chart, I direct your attention to the top line, the total CTF, all the way over to the right, the 20-year number, 9.1%. That is industry leading. May not be number one, but we'll say top decile. Same goes for the 10-year number, and then 5 and 3 are high. I'm not sure what else to add after that. I guess the point here is after a strong cycle like that, the natural expectations is that we would have lower returns going forward. It's kind of the opposite of what an intuition would be, that this would keep going, but you all are aware of that. So our capital market assumptions will be, depending on how the rest of this year works out, would likely be more muted because of these strong returns. Going down the 20-year column, you'll see that real estate at 11.9% and private equity at 13.7%. These are two areas where we have a higher allocation than our peers, and they have proven to be very strong return generators over time. We've built strong competence in both of those areas. Just kind of giving a nod back to our strong board governance. Not all pension funds at the governance level can do what it takes to build programs like these, but ours did. I can say that with pride because I wasn't here. I don't know if you'd like to comment, Pat. Sorry, Mr. McElligott.
I take full credit for anything and blame everybody for anything.
I'd like to remind our board members to please turn on your microphones.
Oh. Did you want to repeat your quip? Okay. He said he's responsible for the good things that happen and I'm responsible for the underperformance, something to that effect. But it was a joke. So do you remember what it said on your cake when you retired? That probably was inappropriate. Excuse me. We had a misspelling. That was funny. Anyway, where am I? Good performance, likely to come down over time. I want to point out fixed income because I know relative to real estate and private equity, at 4% doesn't seem like a lot, but boy, that is a good 20-year return. It really supports, over half the actuarial return assumption. So I don't want to leave them out. I'll try to move it along here. This is the breakdown of the funds managed alongside yours. The $25-ish billion there in the middle is yours. You know the numbers move around with contributions and market performance, but this demonstrates the scale of what we do. Another advantage, many pension systems manage these one at a time or separately. The fact that we don't do that allows us to be more cost competitive. On the how we invest slide, there's a lot here. I'm just going to make a couple points. And these are our asset classes. We invest all those funds with one strategy using these 5 asset classes. You will well, to orient you to the slide, fixed income is the lowest return, lowest risk category. Private equity is the highest returning, highest risk category. All else equal, and then we have things in between, so they're lower to higher risk. The point here is that we have very broad asset class definitions, which means we have the ability to maneuver portfolios within these categories. The overall return and risk profile that each asset class takes is set by the strategic decisions that the board makes. The reason I'm pointing out the overlap is because you can very well build a fixed income portfolio using all high yield or junk bonds, as they're sometimes referred to, or below investment grade, that actually has more risk than a tangible assets portfolio that is built a certain way. So lots of variety in there. We are invested across the spectrum for the most part in all of these asset classes. But when you read in the papers about a particular asset class being too risky for a pension fund, which is a pretty popular perspective, just keep this slide in mind. Well, it sort of depends on how the construction underneath the asset classes are constructed. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. And we, in private equity, which hits the press a lot, we have lots of exposure across the spectrum, but most of it is in that large buyout space, which is a less risky part of the private equity market. Okay, this is a great slide. You're a big part of this, of course. We are very proud of the funded status being one of the top 5 in the country. This has always lagged data, but I think this still applies to today. If they were to do a real-time adjustment, we are, I'll just say that we're very happy that we have done our part to contribute to the strong funded status, but so have the policymakers that offer modest benefits, and so have the rate setting and funding parties, because without the contributions being adequate and without modest benefits, we wouldn't be in this good shape. So I know you may have some differences with some of the other plans on some of those elements, but of course you're aware that your funded status on both plans is, I'm just going to say over 100%. I need to work on my adjectives. Very strong, very good. In terms of initiatives, I'll just highlight a couple of things. Our board decided 7 or 8 years ago to focus on succession planning because we were having some expected retirements in the executive office, and I'm happy to say that we've had 3 major hires internally. With our CIO, who started in February, our head of private equity, who started last September, replacing Tom Ruggles, who was with us for 30 years and was actually the mastermind behind the commingling of the pensions in terms of implementation here. We promoted Lee to be head of risk management and asset allocation, which is the position Chris vacated, which, by the way, is the position I vacated when I became CIO. And then James Aber, we just recently hired. He's behind me in the audience. If he could wave, that'd be great. We recently hired James to replace Chris Phillips. He comes to us from Russell, so we do go outside when we need to. We also have run competitive searches, for example, for the CIO. So I'm very proud of that. There was a time during the pandemic where we were losing a lot of people, not just to retirements, but to the great reshuffle or resignation, whatever you call it. That seems to have abated for now, which is a terrific relief to me and to others. We're working on our Vision, Mission, Values project. We've had such turnover in the leadership ranks that we really want to focus and articulate what is our vision, what are the values we're going to draw on. We think we know those, but we're going to write them down and work on accountability towards those things. And we're generally very well performing. So it's not like we're trying to restructure the organization, but we do want to be deliberate about what has worked well and hang on to that if we can, and change the things that need improvement along with any other changes required due to just the nature of market and working environment. So that's a big project. I think the other thing to highlight here is the climate and diversity. We did present blueprints to the board in July that they're supportive of, that show our roadmaps to becoming a climate competent agency and board, as well as a DEI competent agency and board. And this work is important because we think it will help us avoid financial risks and improve outcomes in other cases, look for opportunities where we may not recognize them if we weren't more schooled up on what the climate change looks like and how people are reacting to it. So these blueprints, as we call them, they show the governance, they're transparent, they talk about the goals for the year at the agency level, within the portfolio, and then within the industry, so that we have full alignment staff to board. And I guess as I talk about ESGs, both those things may fall into, I think it's important to note that we are absolutely trying to navigate, not solve problems, and we are trying to be responsive, not reactive. And that is consistent with fiduciary duty to our funds. So I think the final slide here, I haven't talked a lot about markets. This does summarize what I've said, so I'll let you read that as I'm talking. I didn't talk about markets, and I promised to mention crypto. Couple big events that happened in 2022. One is that Russia invaded Ukraine in February 24th, I think. And after a lot of work and conversations across a broad range of people, WSIB took the position that we would support orderly exit from Russia through our investment program. We've been working at that ever since. I don't think there's a lot more detail to share there. The invasion is still ongoing, as you know. The other one is this cryptocurrency situation that has just developed in the last week. I don't know why I'm laughing, sorry. But there was a bankruptcy of one of the cryptocurrency exchanges, and I think it looks like a lot of people stand to lose a lot of money. We did have an investment through two different sources into that particular company. We don't own any cryptocurrency, no Bitcoin, no actual cryptocurrency. This could be considered an infrastructure-like investment, which would be something we would potentially have exposure to. This was through our private equity portfolio where we had it. It adds up to less than half a basis point, all of that exposure. And then we think we're still working on this, so consider this a preliminary data point. But we think when you look at all of the cryptocurrency type exposure on the infrastructure side that we may have, it's less than a basis point of the whole portfolio. It's not an asset class for us. It's not an area that we've targeted. Obviously, a lot of volatility there, and lack of regulation and other issues make it less of an institutional product. But I know a lot of retail did get taken with it. You have a lot of celebrity endorsements, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the update there. We're working through inflation expectations, high inflation expectations that increased significantly this year, put a lot of pressure on both our equity and bond portfolios. So we see negative returns in those two areas. And depending on the path going forward, well, that'll eventually make its way through and put us in a better position. But we have lots of real estate exposure. There's inflation protection there. We have other sources of protection. We think I think we'll come out okay. We'll see. We'll keep you updated. With that, I've finished my prepared remarks and my jokes for the day.
Are there any questions or comments? Patrick.
I got to say that I've been off the board, I think, for about 10 years, and and for the time that I was there, the board is successful because of the staff that is backing up the board. And I can see there's been no letdown in that. You got high quality people out there. I still keep still look around and see what's going on and the name changes and but is it 175 billion?
Yeah.
We celebrated when we got to 50 billion.
I know.
And so it's amazing to see how the funds have continued to grow and we don't take chances. And the one on the crypto, that's a private equity partner that
Yeah.
they just have money for a better way of saying it's like a hedge.
Yeah.
It's a small hedge and that's all
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they'd see it as a hedge, but it was probably dipping a toe in the water to
Yes.
get to know the market.
Yeah, but great
Yeah, yeah.
job. Every month, I am glad that you do such a great job because I get this paycheck and it's really nice to have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Berquist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allison, just want to say thank you for, your outreach at the last session in the legislature. It's, never easy job, I'm sure, what you're doing because you got to deal with us. And so your team, Kurt, it's been great to work with as well. So just really appreciate your leadership and look forward to continuing that relationship.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mark?
I have a very general question.
Huh.
Just asking for your opinion. I think I saw in the news recently where the state of Missouri divested considerable investments that they had. I think it was in BlackRock. And I sort of listened and read to I think it was the state treasurer who was fronting that or explaining to the public. And it seemed to me to be like more politically motivated than fiduciary motivated. I wonder if you had any comments on that.
Well, I typically wouldn't comment on another state's decisions, but BlackRock is a big manager of ours. They manage billions of dollars, and some people are raising issues with comments that their leader has made about some ESG efforts and other things. The products that we're in are passive exposures, meaning they replicate the market. There's no tilting going on in those portfolios for or against any particular sector or geography. We select the benchmark and then they match it. The other issue that comes up with BlackRock from time to time is the voting that they do of the shares on behalf of their clients. And when we hire BlackRock for U.S. equity, we are voting our own shares. And that has been the case, Pat, since you were chair, or before. So I think that's a difference. They have now opened up that service, by the way, to all of their clients. So I get to go to conference and say, oh, you guys weren't doing that? But it certainly is indicative of the environment we're in, where there is a lot of pressure politically to influence the investment programs. I call it, when I get it right, politicization of the investment process, and it's increasing every year. And I think I was just recently interviewed by Pension and Investments magazine, and I mentioned this governance that we have in Washington with the multiple appointment authorities really creates an avenue to be able to diversify that external influence so that it doesn't overtake what I consider to be this jewel in Washington State and maintaining the integrity of the program. Is that enough information that you feel satisfied
Yes.
without me commenting on Missouri? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for you. On your map, which identifies the top 5.
Yes.
Can you just an overview? What do we have in common with the others, and what do we not have in common with them as far as the other 4? I mean, obviously, we're doing something right to be very high.
If I knew how to go back, I think.
You just touch this slide at the bottom.
That's hilarious. Thank you. Check this out. Okay. It's the touch screen. Who knew? Okay. So South Dakota is the chief investment officer there, has spent his entire career working there. He started out, I think, as an analyst, and he is now running the show. He's phenomenally talented. He has a strong team. I believe it's almost all internally managed. So that's a major difference from us. We're over half externally managed. Wisconsin has also an excellent investment team. They have that's SWIB, as we refer to it. They have a risk sharing model that's built into their policy. So when they over earn, they pay out more. When they underperform, they pay out less, kind of thing. So they're the only state I can think of that has managed to implement that. They had a person that left Wisconsin that went to be CIO at New Mexico, and I think he was working on getting that done there. He was there, I think, 4 years before he moved to the private sector. I'm not sure if that was fully implemented or not. Let's see, New York and Tennessee. I don't know if I can comment on the differences between those two. I know our investment programs are very different, but on the funding side, on the cost sharing, on their policy side, which is a major driver, I don't know that I'm in a position to comment. Would you like me to? Who asked that question? Okay, thank you. Would you like me to follow up with you?
I was just curious, like I said, I think anytime we have the opportunity to see what others are doing, and especially when we're in that group of doing well, there's probably some things that we could take from others to make ourselves even better. That's what I was just trying to get to.
Yeah, I think we do get together regularly. I do, and the chief investment officer, Chris Hannick, does as well, to talk to the other CIOs and executive directors to learn what they're doing and how we might improve. Tennessee is a very different program than we do. I don't think there's a huge amount of overlap there, but I can't draw the specifics. I'm glad New York's in there. That's a massive plan. So, but I don't know they have a different governance structure, much less diversified than ours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about your climate equity diversity blueprints and how those affect your decision making in terms of investment. So does that mean that we would not invest in companies that had a poor DEI track record or had a poor record in terms of climate impacts? So could you talk just about that framework?
Sure. To answer that question directly, and I think you could look at the corollary, which is if this is a pollution creating industry, would we not invest in that, right? So there is an ESG track record as well. And the quick and easy answer to that is no, this is not a screening methodology. What the blueprints do is they establish that we have a journey to go on and that we're going to have governance around that, and we're going to have a reporting structure, and we're going to be organized in the way that we think about things. And what I mean by that is that if, for example, we decide at the agency level that we no longer support plastic water bottles at meetings, just using a real life example, so you know, because these are handy to give to presenters and board members. But if we decide we don't want to do that anymore because we want to change our our footprint, what we're trying to say is that does not mean we're going to not invest in Pepsi, right? That doesn't translate. You may need to have different goals for your agency versus what you're going to mandate in a portfolio. The overarching goal in the portfolio is that mission, right? Maximize return for the exclusive benefit of participants and beneficiaries. Now, if we get the sense that single-use plastics are going away, are we going to question our holdings in those areas that maybe rely on that and try to think about what's going on? How might we position the portfolio differently? Yes, but the blueprint establishes the way that we'll go about assessing those types of decisions. So it starts with education, measurement, actions, advocacy, and there's a fifth one that I'm not drawing off the top of my head. But for each of those areas, the 3 areas, those measurements will come to the board and say, here's what we're thinking of doing. The goal is to build the competence so that within the investment program, we're asking the right questions of our managers. We notice there does not seem to be a lot of diversity in your decision making at this particular partner. We're interested in the fund. how are you going to, the way it shows up, how are you going to retain your staff? How are you going to attract new talent? How are you going to improve your decision making? You're going to have our funds for 10 to 15 years. What are your plans? That's what we go for. We go for disclosure on the public company level, but what the blueprints do is get people aligned so that they're aware of what we're doing. Because this is one where it's hard to satisfy really anybody. So we just have to stick to the path with the fiduciary duty and make sure we're making good practical decisions with the support of our board.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Just real quick, and I remember when I was there, there's a lot of pressure, and that's the political pressure as well as the other ones that
Yeah.
you gotta hold on to what you put into the structure. I remember one time there was something that they wanted us to do, and if you pull everything out, you have no skin in the game, and why are they going to listen to you? So if you're
Yeah.
if you're trying to manage change within some of these private equity firms and stuff like that, you have to be involved with them to affect change. And I think that's one of the things that the board or the state investment board has done very well in some of the organizations that you're associated with. And I think you're probably still associated with the ones that I remember. And
Yes.
it's a good plan.
Yeah.
It makes us what we are today,
Yeah.
strong in what we're doing because we don't alter and we don't you don't allow the politics to influence or adversely impact the investments we are making. And we always have the ability to talk to our partners and make sure that they understand where we want to be. And I always thought that was a great plan. So good job again.
Thanks. And to you too.
Other comments, questions? Making sure I don't see anything on the screen.
I'd like to thank Allison and her team before she finishes up. We had a great working relationship with the SIB when we were tenants here, and now that we're no longer tenants here, I am very grateful for the way that you guys have continued to support us with board meeting technology, et cetera. Thank you so much. It's been very well done, and I appreciate your personal involvement in all of that as well.
Thank you. Happy to have you. All right.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Nelson, looks like item number 3 is survivor purchase of service credit for authorized leave of absence. Comprehensive report. Is it Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah?
As you will perhaps recall, this was a topic that the board discussed earlier in the interim. Sarah gave an initial presentation at that time. The board asked for some follow-up information, which Sarah has been working with DRS on getting. And with that, I will turn it over to her. It's up there, Tim.
That didn't help. There we go. Morning, Sarah. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. As I just said, good morning. This should be fairly quick. It's just, I'll give some reminders for everyone of what we talked about in June. So the issue before the board was that only members may purchase service credit for unpaid authorized leaves of absence unless the member dies while performing uniform service for the United States. This issue came to the board, just a refresher, came to the board staff through the Ombuds program. We received a call from the surviving spouse of a member who'd passed away prior to retirement. He had intended to purchase service credit for unpaid authorized leave of absence time during his career. So after he passed, she contacted Department of Retirement and asked if she could make that purchase on his behalf and was told she could not because it was not permitted under the law. And that's when she contacted us and we confirmed that to her. So the law she's working within discusses several types of authorized leave of absence and service credit for those paid and unpaid. The one we're looking at is a max of 2 years during a member's career. It's often we see it for injury and illness, FMLA time, any kind of time, excuse me, that the member's off of work and does not have paid leave to supplement their time. Just for the one piece that came up in this is the military, interrupted military service credit time is also under the same statute. And under that statute, a surviving spouse is permitted to purchase time service credit for military time if the member left service for that military time and is killed in action. So the spouse can purchase some time on behalf of the member. So the question that came up in June was how often does this occur? How many members are taking advantage of these types of purchases? For unpaid authorized leaves of absence, the data I requested from DRS was for the last 17 years. 68 members have purchased service credit for unpaid ALOA. And just as a comparison, interrupted military time, 350 members have purchased service credit for their time, and no surviving spouses have purchased service credit on behalf of a deceased member. So, any questions as we look at next steps for this issue?
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. What would the potential audience, like how many potential purchases could there be?
We think it would be low, just based on the numbers we have, and then also talking to the actuaries. We had an initial conversation with the actuaries office about this, and just their take from it. Also, our conversation with DRS. This doesn't come up a lot. DRS thought this was the first time they'd had this question from a surviving spouse for this particular type of purchase. So we don't anticipate a large number at this point. And based on the data, it's about, if you average it out, it's about 4 members a year who have purchased unpaid ALOA time. So
out of those 4 purchases, then the prospective audience would be the surviving spouses of any of those 4 who potentially died while they were on leave of absence. Yeah, okay.
Or just
Can I clarify that? So these 68, the 4 per year, are the ones that actually did purchase.
Correct.
We don't have the number of how many are actually on unpaid leave and did not purchase.
No, we
And
don't have.
I'm assuming that some of these unpaid leaves are like, I am seriously ill, potentially, you know, and if you don't survive, that's when this type of opportunity would occur. And so
this purchase is prior to retirement. So yeah, it could be that someone is ill and it's not considered line of duty. There's other things it's not considered. It's just straight unpaid authorized leave time that they're trying to recover. And it is hard to gauge that data because we don't know. It's not something DRS would keep track of who's contacted them over the years asking this question. That I think I said in June too, there were the few people I talked to at DRS about it. They are well seasoned with the agency and would be aware of these types of questions. And it was the first time they recalled having this question.
it sounds like it could be kind of a traumatic time for that family if there is an ill law enforcement officer or firefighter. I know somebody in Renton that went through that. I think the last thing on their mind during that time is, okay, before you pass, make sure you buy your credit, because I can't do it if you don't make it. So I just want to try to understand if there is that potential out there, and just it's never even come up. Okay.
Sure.
Other comments? Not seeing anybody on the screen.
Okay, so our next steps would be to propose legislation to allow survivors to purchase service credit on behalf of deceased members for unpaid ALOA time, or take no action at this time.
Sure. Go ahead. Mark?
So I'll move that we adopt option 2, no action at this time.
Okay, is there a second? Second. I got you, Jay. We do have a second. Motion made and seconded. Discussion or questions? Thank you. Right. Seeing no questions or other comments, all those in favor of option number 2 to take no action at this time, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Option number 2 is passed.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, great job.
Thank you. I'm out of practice. I need to get back into it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Well,
John.
we can work on that for you. Don't worry. Careful what you ask for. Steve, item number 4, strategic planning was the SWOT analysis feedback.
Yes, so at the last meeting of the board, you had a presentation that Tim facilitated, a discussion that Tim facilitated regarding threats and opportunities and typical SWOT analysis. The team did a great job while you guys were talking of gathering your comments together and then providing all of those to Tim, who is kind of who has organized the discussion that you had and is going to give you kind of the follow-up on that. And with that, I will turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Stephen. For the record, Tim Valencia, Deputy Director for the Left Plan 2 Retirement Board. As Steve mentioned, this is a follow-up to last month's robust discussion identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So just real briefly that I want to frame this discussion a little more because this is a continuation of the discussion as we're moving towards, actual strategic initiatives. You heard Allison talk about where SIB is at in this process. So it is we're in line with our partners in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here. But the real key to strategic planning, that this is really all about, having a process that aligns your vision and your mission and your goals, to move towards its strategic objectives, to meet that mission. And in your case, properly planning or administering Left Plan 2 for the benefit of the members and beneficiaries. Ultimately, again, this is what we're trying to find out. What are the most important elements? That's really what a strategic planning process does. You're looking at a broad set of information, which is where we got from the SWOT. And now we need to look at what are the most important things that came out of that discussion as they relate to the existing strategic plan, and are there important enough things where you need to make modifications to your strategic plan, or is there direction in terms of the objectives, or even down to the specific tactics? So it's really almost like the traditional kind of funnel. It's like we start with a lot of information, we start whittling down what is the most important things that this board needs to be doing to accomplish its mission and its vision. I will point out, just so that everybody's aware, that there are other uses for the strategic plan as well. As a state agency, from time to time, through a variety of different reasons, we'll be asked when we're submitting information, say to OFM, sometimes the governor's office, they'll ask us for a copy of our strategic plan. Part of that is making sure that we're in line with the governor's strategic plan. So there are times where we have to have a document available of that nature. And one key example is that when I do the budget submission, that's one of the documents that has to be included in there. So there are some other uses for this, along with the actual, management of the plan itself. The strategic plan, which was included in your materials the last couple of months, that was first created by this board in 2006. That was the first time they met and did strategic planning. The mission, the vision, and the goals and objectives have actually remained very stable since that point. There really haven't been significant changes, which isn't inappropriate for a plan that's done really well, and B, for this kind of an organization, because it's a very long-term type of entity. However, it is incredibly important to always continue to review it and adjust it. You'll note, as you may have read through the strategic plan, there are some things that were tied to what became the creation and passage of the benefit enhancement. There's rate stability items. There's some things in there, the alternate revenue items all came out of the original strategic plan. This is now that time where you can be looking at, are those still the most important things that we're focusing on, or are there other elements? So that's what this discussion is supposed to lead toward. So I would encourage you, to rely on that, the strategic plan document, and really give that some thought as you're going through this conversation today. So as Steve said, what we did when after the last meeting, the staff took everything, all the different notes that we took, and tried to condense them down into the different parts of the SWOT analysis. What did we hear? So part of this is making sure, and again, that was in your material, that the real first question here is whether or not you got a chance to look at this, and if it appears to have captured everything that you were saying. If there's anything that anybody has thought of since that meeting, as I mentioned at the end of the meeting, there's always an opportunity to continue to add, or if there's something that somebody didn't see reflected on there, please let us know. But from this information, what we looked at was what were the recurring themes, if you will. And we looked at them in 4 different buckets, if you will. What are the things that really seem to be, continually popped up in the individual comments? So the 4 emergent themes that we really saw, and this is how I want to frame the conversation today, is communications popped up in a variety of things and in all sectors. As we said, things can pop up in all sectors. Relationships, then the benefits, and then what I've labeled operational integrity, which is operations of the board, operations of the organization, which are important aspects of properly managing the plan. So from here, I just want to, and this is where I'm going to open it up. We can go through each one of these, similar to what we did with the SWOT analysis. Now let's talk about these emergent themes, and the question is, what is the most important thing? What's the most important thing you need to do or want to do, or what's the most important thing we should be paying attention to with regard to each element? So let's start with communications. So, like managing expectations came up a lot. I know Senator Holy brought it up. Dennis, you brought it up, that we have the board's in this position where it's going to be important to manage expectations. There's just this marquee benefit that just got passed. Pat brought up, the risk of complacency in there. So opportunities, threats, in both cases. So that's just one element of communications. But as you think about all the different comments that you may have made about communications, that was a very, very recurring theme. What do you think are the most important things about communications that this board needs to be focusing on? I'll open that up to your discussion.
I would offer member outreach. And I think that that goes for all of our stakeholders involved as far as our group here. When we talk about legislature, our employers, police, fire, I think those are important pieces. Again, we try to manage the expectations, but at the same time, just to continue to put out messaging that is, one, it's factual, it's positive, and it lets them know that we're working on. I've learned that in the absence of information, people make their own up, and that doesn't help either. So I think you taught me that, Pat. Yes, sir, Jay.
I think related to that is making sure we have a good diversity of communications. I don't know when the last time we've surveyed members about how we communicate with them and what methods they prefer, and to make sure that we're hitting people where they are and they're getting the information rather than assuming that they're getting the information. So I don't know when's the last time we've done that, but that would be important to me to understand what their needs are.
Good point.
Can I? Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
got-
There's a board member
Oh,
with a hand
Jason,
up.
sorry. I was looking for you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think Jay kind of hit on what I was going to bring up, but one thing is people that are, a vast majority of people in our plan do communicate very differently, as we've been communicating differently with, online through the pandemic and stuff. But I consistently get asked questions that are sometimes on our website, sometimes they're not on our website. Sometimes they're, super minutia specific. Sometimes they're very broad questions. And I think the website has been working. One of the things that consistently I get feedback on, I said, did you read your letter? And a lot of times I get, what letter? And I said, you get a quarterly update in the mail. It's very informative, especially the last one was very important because it discussed the benefit improvement specifics. And a lot of those folks were like, I'm not sure which one you mean. Well, we all know if you are in this plan and you have an address, you get a letter. But a lot of those folks, I think that letter's getting either tossed as junk mail or they're just not reading it for whatever reason because they're busy. But that's probably one of the biggest feedback points on communication that I hear. When I ask is whether or not they're reading that letter or not. Like I said, I would say 25% do and probably 75% don't. I don't know if there's a better way to digitally send that letter out or put it on our website. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Jason. Pat?
I don't want to dig down too deep, but Jason just brought up a good point that I've heard for the last 2 weeks now. So instead of being broad, I'm going to be specific, if I could say the word. The letter went out and the email went out about the benefit enhancement, went out on October 27th. And they said, you've got 1 month to get this information back to DRS. I've talked to numerous people and I said, did you get the letter or did you read it? And they go, yep. And I said, did you fill out the paperwork? And they go, well, I'm going to. I said, did you see that there is a date specific you're supposed to have it back? And I think I just heard it. I don't know how we do it. I don't know if this board has to think, and that's going to sound bad, but I don't think this board needs to hold everybody's hand. But at the same time, they were supposed to contact DRS with the information back to them by the 27th. I was wondering at this time whether DRS has a way of telling us on the number of people have responded percentage-wise to on where they're at with it, because you know what's going to happen after the 27th or the first of the year. Then everybody's going to say, "Oh my God, what happened?" And then I don't want to say it's a blame game, but they're going to say we didn't get enough information ahead of time to know. And I think we need to be prepared to say, yeah, we gave you as much information we could. You just didn't follow through. Kind of tough love. So Steve, you got something on that?
Well, we have been in communication with DRS about that, and they have actually shared some updates about how many people they'd already heard from, because we had some of the exact same concerns. Anytime you put a deadline, the first question is, what happens when somebody misses the deadline? And so that's the questions that we had for DRS. It's difficult, but from their perspective, in administering it with the literally thousands of people that are going to retirees that are going to receive this benefit in January, they don't have the opportunity for a lot of hand holding, and they don't have the opportunity to they'll answer questions if people contact them, but as far as reaching out to them multiple times, we sent you something, did you see it? You haven't answered yet, are you going to answer? There's just not the possibility of that from DRS's perspective. That being said, they, between the deadline, if you will, and January, if members have questions or concerns, if they send stuff into DRS and it gets there a day or two late, I don't think that that piece of it, since it wasn't in statute, is as critical as that January payment date. And so we have put their materials out on our website. Jay, to get back to your idea about the survey, we did do a survey years ago, but so much has changed, especially since pandemic. Back when we were talking about, we had a very small percentage of the membership that was interested in social media, and social media at that time was Facebook. So nowadays, what would a social media plan look like, and how much more popular would it be with members than it was 10 years ago? Those are excellent questions that need answered. We'll keep coordinating with DRS about the implementation of this, but so far they've done an outstanding job of keeping us in the loop, letting us share their information with our membership as much as we can in the newsletter and the website. And the Facebook posts right now is really all we've got.
And that's what I'm getting to, Steve. I want to make sure DRS is doing an excellent job with what they're putting out, because if you're actually following it, if you do read your letter and you do read your email, you can actually get the paperwork in on time. But as well as I do is that, and sometimes, I learned a long time ago is don't give them too many options. If you give them too many options, they seize up and they fall over. And so it'll take us another week, another year to get them to where they need to be. So I want to make sure that, first of all, DRS, when people start to snipe, that we've got the information to say it's not DRS's fault, it's your fault. And if they try to come to this board and say this board has not provided enough information, we need to be able to say, here's all these documents, this is what we've been doing, and this is not on us, this is on you, because sometimes if they don't get their way at the board or DRS, they're going to go to their legislators.
Yeah.
And that's when and then we end up with a situation. I want to make sure that with the people that we have on this board in the way of Senator Holy or Steve and Senator Rivers, that they don't get inundated with this kind of stuff either, because everybody here is doing what needs to be done to get the money out. It's a great benefit. It is something that everybody should be proud of, not only the State Investment Board, DRS, but all of us. But what's going to happen is that there's going to be a handful, not even a handful of people, but people are going to be upset come January 1 because they didn't fill out their paperwork. Now they're in, some of the other things. So I don't mean to harp on this, but
no, for this first group, it's what we're talking about here is members who are already retired, Pat, and they have one choice. You're getting a lump sum, and if you, for tax reasons or otherwise, you want to annuitize that, you can. If you don't get back in touch with DRS, you get the lump sum on January. So the group that you're talking about, if they want an annuity, if they don't want one big check, but they would rather spread it out over their lifetime, they need to contact DRS before that goes out. And if they don't, and then all of a sudden, or maybe they change their mind and decide, you know what, I wish I'd made a different choice, maybe I will say that I never got notified. Yes, that happens. You will, but again, DRS has sent the message out. The board, at least as much as possible, has sent the message out, and will continue to communicate until all the way up until January to get, I want to say, as of the last time we heard from DRS, there'd been fewer than 100 people that had requested the annuity. But I would imagine that that was really early. So, and I don't know that they have the details on all the people requesting estimates and stuff, so forth of that. But there you have it. I think you can prepare for that. Anytime you give a benefit to 5,000 people, the odds that all of them are going to be satisfied with it's zero.
Just follow through.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Pat brings forward, I mean, we're talking about generational differences in the way we handle things, and that's exactly what Jay's doing. And I think at some point, asking the members and finding out how we best communicate. I know that Instagram, the different tweets to Facebook, those are very popular for the younger people. But when I get a phone call from an 86-year-old person who does not even understand the internet, it doesn't work.
Did you point at me?
No, not yet. For the record, neither one of those two. But I like Jay's idea where he's going. I think that would be something we should look at down the road.
Sorry to get off.
That was good.
No, actually, no, that's right on topic, in fact, Pat. And so let me see if we can open that up a little bit more. If you were looking at, say we're looking at the next biennium, 23-25, which is really the strategic plan cycle that we're on right now, part of this was talking about messaging or the content. What do you guys see as the 3 to 5 most important things we need to communicate? And I asked that because one of the things that came up a lot was telling the proper story, like telling some of the history, which ties into the complacency thing, talks into some of the relationship things in terms of making sure, I think Senator Holy had brought up this idea of ensuring that the legislature understands what we're doing. So there's, content there. Is it BIA only? Is there, what are some of the most important things that we need to be communicating in the next biennium?
Go ahead, please.
So just a couple off the top of my head. I mean, you mentioned what we're doing, right? I mean, I think it's important for members and anyone that's paying attention to the work of this board that the people know what we're doing. They can track what we're doing. They can track what decisions are being made. And the other thing too is in terms of kind of a two-way communication is, what needs attention, right? And making sure that people have a good inroad to us about what may need attention. What's the next big thing that's out there that people are worried about, concerned about, that they think the board needs to take some attention with. So those are just the three that come to my mind.
I would also, Pat brings up, I hate some stories, right? But what he brings to us is history. And what we sometimes miss out is that we're focused on the future, but we don't share our victories from things that we've accomplished. I mean, this board has done some great things over the course of many years, and we should also put those things out there so they know the value of this board and what we're doing, why we're here. See, I like your stories. Good, Pat.
Well, when you talk about, what are we looking for in the future? One of the things that we know that's a hot topic right now is, and everybody has it, but the increased workload of police and fire, and what we need to do to to help them psychologically. We have a lot of issues with people seeing things in the way of PTSD and some of the other issues that we have coming up. And I think if we, it's already here on top of us, but maybe we need to start focusing in on what we can do to help and not knee jerk on what we think we need to do to help. And I think that might be a topic that we might want to address down the road as a board, because that would be a benefit enhancement if we got something to be able to give them some relief. Firefighters have the IFF that has programs that they can deal with firefighters. I am not, and no offense, Jason, I'm not in tune with police, but I believe they probably have some projects too, and see if there's a benefit for Washington State Police and Fire that we can add to it. And I know, we're not even talking about the State Patrol. They have the same issues as we do as officers on the highways. And I think that might be something we look at. I mean, this BIA we just did is great. But now we need to come up with what is also affecting our members and retirees as we go forward. And I think that might be something we might want to look at.
Good points.
Mr. Chair.
Jason, sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
Thank you. As you break down our left two plan, you kind of got three people, three different types of folks in the plan. You've got the young member who's 10 years, who really has no strong concept of what left two is. They know they have a retirement. They maybe saw a presentation about kind of how this works, but respectively, they're probably not super drawn in on their retirement. At least that's my experience. And you've got the folks that are kind of in the middle. You're 35 to 45. Maybe I've been in service for 15 years and I'm kind of starting to pay a little bit more attention. They're starting to ask questions. Those are the people that, you know, retirement's still a little nebulous to me. Maybe I got my own savings, but I kind of know about left two. And then of course, group three is the people that are either kind of retired or, you know, at that 20, 25-year mark, and they're making phone calls. You know, they're asking Pat questions on, hey, you're on the board. What do I need to do? And I think where an opportunity to create relationships and explain benefits to preempt a lot of stuff is that middle section. And I would say that's who I get the most questions from. Obviously, you get the questions from the guys and the gals that are getting ready to retire, but I get a lot of questions like, hey, what do I need to be thinking about? And I'm glad I get those questions because obviously those are things that people need to be cognitive of. But there's a huge, I think, outreach opportunity there. And whether that, as Jay talked about, like we go to electronic notification or electronic outreach letter. And I do like what Pat said, and I agree wholeheartedly. Too many options and too much information is usually not great for trying to get your message out. But I think if we have two strong methods, where the newsletter, I like the newsletter. I have folks that, you know, they do like that newsletter. They like to have something in hand. I also get asked a lot, why isn't this electronic? And if you go to the DRS website, there is no option for electronic notification. So I think it's a great conversation this morning because these are all things that have kind of come up in the past. And obviously, we've all been dealing with things over the last few years. But I do think there's a huge opportunity to kind of cut off any of the things that Pat were talking about. Is like, hey, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. And if somebody says, you know, I really would like a different manner of communication, I think that if we can offer it, we definitely should, because that's going to just increase our relationships. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Other comments? I'll let you corral us back together, Tim.
trying to capture everything where I can. I am curious though, and Steve, perhaps you can back that up. And Jay, as Steve said, that we did do a survey of the membership. I think we're back in 2004, 2005 when we were trying to gather some initial information, and we did get a lot of feedback from the particularly from the law enforcement side on the board, but a lot of the board members at that time, granted, very different time in the digital age. But there was a lot of concern about us collecting emails, or that there wasn't a lot of usage, particularly in the law enforcement community. I'm actually asking in that vein. It's certainly something if we board wants to do a survey, those type of things we would ask. But generally speaking, has that changed? A lot of the world has had to change. People are a lot more comfortable with social media and whatnot. Is that reluctance for the public safety community to utilize, give their emails, that sort of thing? Has that changed at all in your minds?
I think it has. I'll give an example. Maybe 10 years ago or even longer, Block Ops made an effort to collect emails of members so they could do direct notifications. And During that time frame, I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Tim. There were people that were like, I don't really want to give my email out, and well, I'll give you my work email, but they're like, well, we can't use the work email for that. And people were hesitant. And now, a real easy example, and I think a lot of you may identify this. It's like if you call somebody, they're like, why didn't you just text me? And I use that example as the approach to technology and utilization of technology, I think, has changed drastically in the last 10 years. And I think there's a higher expectation of digital notification as opposed to quote unquote analog method. Hence my example, right? The phone call being the analog message. Hey, I really want to talk to Mark. And maybe Mark said, well, hey, if you can just shoot me a text and let me know, then I can call you back maybe in a couple hours or whatever the case is. Or as, you know, like my kids like to say, why didn't you just send me a text, you weirdo? You know, it's like a phone call is like, you know, that's an anomaly to them. Everything is digital. They like the text, they like the email, whatever, you know, communication stream they're using. So I think it's something that's definitely worth exploring just because of the dramatic changes in social media structure, but also, I mean, think everybody on this board, how many emails were you sending 10 years ago versus yesterday is dramatically different, right? We do so much via digital ways just because of convenience and also out of necessity, but it's also because social norms and our social dynamics have changed so much. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other comments on communications? What else is, you know, what really comes to mind when you're thinking about, you know, communications as a, you know, every time that it came up, I mean, both, you know, positive or negative things we can either improve or things that we're not doing. You know, Dennis, you mentioned, you know, the outreach and the stakeholder outreach. You know, we have some outreach that we're doing, but is there something more? Are we missing? What does that mean to you when you say I want to do member outreach? What does that, you know, what comes to mind when you were thinking of that?
I just think to keep it on the forefront of what we're doing, to continue on with the you know, the path that you've already started. I think you do a very good job by reaching out. I don't know what the member outreach looks like from the employer side or the legislator side from what you're doing. I know we see it from the fire side, probably see it from the police side as well. But I'm sure you could speak to that. I don't know, but I know that you're doing good things for us. I know you make yourself available. I think our members want to see that. And I do agree with Jason said that describe that time frame in the fire service, 0 to 10, 0 to 15, maybe at 15 years, they start to think about it, you know, and then all of a sudden at year 25, 30, and then they're fully invested in what we're trying to accomplish here. So, you know.
For us, the outreach, going back a long period of time, it's been fairly regular with like walk-ups in the State Council of Fire. We're invited to either have a table and just have information, or occasionally invited to talk about a specific topic at your conferences, whether those are the annual membership conferences or the ledge conferences or the educational conferences. On the employer side, we're regularly invited to have a table at the fire commissioners. Tim was there last month. On the rest of it tends to be a little bit more ad hoc because pension policy, for lack of a better word, is usually not a topic at, like, for most of the employers. It has the questions that come up at a conference have more to do with payroll and reporting type issues. The policy questions, when there is one, then we might get Steve, can you come and talk to the fire chiefs are having an e-board meeting? Can you come and talk to us about this particular bill and answer questions? Yes. So we accept all of those, but they tend to pop up. They're more issue specific. And we to kind of follow the leads of the ledge liaisons for those groups. Candace for cities, for instance, tracks everything that the board is doing, have a good open line of communication with her. If she's got questions, she knows she can come to me and get the answer, or as far as what the board's doing and why, and then take it back to her board. Usually that, she's the one presenting it, and that's all that they need is to hear that. We have talked with like cities in the past about maybe having a table there, but their available space and the kind of the benefit of having us there it's never really kind of worked out. But that's where things sit. So it's kind of structured on the member side. Fraternal Order of Police has become more active over the last 10 years. We'll get invited sometimes to have a table or same thing, present to their e-board or present to their conference on a particular topic. Usually it's never like a regular thing, like it might be with the state council, where we pretty much got a table there at your annual conference. Plan on having a table there every year, because even if we're not talking about it, then we're there to talk to the members about their questions.
All right, well, let's keep thinking about that. If something else pops in, I think there's a couple of good ideas have come out of communications there for us to look into, further for things that are going to be actionable, I believe. So let's move to relationships, which is already, started to pop up, and some of this starts to come into the communications side as well. We haven't really talked about the as much on the legislative side, but Pat, you had mentioned, the relationships with the legislature, particularly back when we were passing 790. But there's thoughts about how do we, there was a strength in the relationships and the credibility that the board has developed with the, with the legislature. So I mean, like I said, relationships got mentioned 7, 8, 9 times easily through the course of last month's discussions. So, what are the most important things to you in terms of relationships and what the board should be focused on in terms of managing relationships, or who they should be having relationships with? Mark, go ahead.
Yes, yep. So I think the board staff does a fantastic job of managing relationships with other agencies, in particular, state agencies. It seems to me that they know the individuals from those state agencies, and they have a very good, whether it's the auditor's office, Department of Retirement Systems, or the state actuary's office, and even, should I say, the Office of Financial Management, So they know, they're very, very skilled at knowing how the lay of the land and what those agencies do and the people that are in those agencies. And I think that's one of the board's strengths from the very beginning, is managing and cultivating relationships to get the work done that they get done on the board's behalf and on the members' behalf, and I would say on all the stakeholders' behalf, from the employer representatives, because they're very, in my experience, the board staff has been very sophisticated in how they manage those relationships and how they cultivate them for our benefit, everybody's benefit.
Dennis, you'd mentioned the diversity of the board, both, as a strength with, we got member representative, employer representative, legislative representatives. And of course, Mark, you've mentioned a couple times in terms of, we'll call it cultivating participation in the employer community, because there were some challenges there. I don't know, Jay, do you have any comment on things that maybe the board could do better with the employer community or should be doing with the employer community?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything kind of specifically off the top of my head. That's something I can think about. I think about what I've seen in my time. I've been the city manager for about 3 years, but I was assistant for about 10. I'm trying to think about what communication came in that I'm aware of that went out to my employees, and I don't have a big memory of of seeing a lot of that stuff. So to me, I think it's important that we're making sure that the employers are aware of communications that are going out. So I think about this topic of deadlines. So I haven't had any communication with my employees about, hey, making sure you got the letter, make sure there's a deadline there, make sure you're paying attention to it. And I probably would have if I'd have thought about it, right? So I think making sure that the employers are also pushing out information to their employees and making sure that information is getting out too would be important. So from that perspective, I think there's probably work we can do.
And I'm curious from the discussion they were having a few minutes ago with in terms of the outreach element in that relationship with the employer community, did you, from your purview, kind of agree with that assessment? And I've been to some of the employer reps, like I went to, I think, to county officials meeting once. I can't remember. I've been to a couple of employer ones, and yeah, that group, in the same context that when I go to a fire or law enforcement thing, I'm talking to a lot of members and they have member questions. There weren't a lot of questions from that employer group in terms of the structural stuff. Do you think that there are opportunities or needs in that community? Is it just a matter of the right messaging, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a Washington City Managers Association that every city manager and assistant city manager and a lot of others are members to, and we have an annual conference. We're always looking for speakers and ways to get new information out, so that might be an opportunity to have an audience with all of them around a topic or two and things that might be of interest for us. So I just throw that out there.
Probably the other side of it, I was thinking about the same thing Jay was thinking about, but the other one is the one that's directly, because Jay as a city manager and all city managers, they would, with this thing, with the letter, they could just contact the head of the fire department, police department, and say, make sure your members understand they have a deadline. And so it trickles down. So when you're talking about the city managers and having conferences with them, the city managers are very busy and they have a lot of moving parts. The one moving part that would help in benefits would be HR. So if they have a statewide conference, that would be because that would be the hands-on on the employer side of benefits and communications, I would believe. Pretty close, yeah. So I got to sit with a couple city managers at one point, and if I got 15 minutes with it, I was lucky, because there's too many things going on within the organizations that you're spread so thin with everything you got, but you have a way of, making other people, lack of a better word, do their job when you say, make sure they got this thing going on. So you'd be up here, HR would be down here, having the city managers group, informing them going on, and then also having a more intense conference with the HR directors in the state. But I don't know.
Thanks, Pat. Go ahead, Jay.
Just one more I can think of in terms of, it's probably related to communications, also relationships. I just think about all the unions have executive boards and have union presidents. And again, as we think about communication, building relationships and making sure that our messaging is getting out and people are getting what they need, there's another layer there. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if there's a place where they all communicate together. There probably is through IAFF and through other sources. So I'm just thinking that might be another opportunity to reach out, make sure we're building relationships, communications getting disseminated in that way. Because again, they have an audience with their members more often than I do.
Yeah, one thing we've learned is that when you separate from the fire service or the police service, there is a separation. And so you look for, maybe a group, an organization, whatever. And a number of years ago, we had these conversations with the legislature about forming, like our group has a retiree group at the state council. And so when we communicate, we put stuff out through our retiree group. That's one way we can reach, but that's only reaching the people who are associated with the retiree group. And then you still have this huge other, number. I'm not even sure how many thousands of people aren't associated with them, and they don't get the messaging. So when we talk about relationships, we should probably start to include probably our retiree groups to make sure when we message, like you said, you're going to do all the outreach you want, and you can send it to your members who work inside your city. But unless they're going to take that message and make some phone calls or try to track some people down, it becomes difficult.
Yeah, that, for instance, Pat, back to your earlier question about the communication on this benefit to the choice to retirees. One of the challenges is when you're actively employed, your address gets reported to DRS on a regular basis, so they know right where you live. As soon as you retire, your employer is not reporting anything anymore, and now you, as an individual, are responsible to let DRS know where you live. And you may not be thinking about that at all when you move to Arizona. And so there's, in all likelihood, there is, we heard from members 6 months after the benefit improvement passed, what? Something passed and it affects me? So that is one of the potential audiences that we may hear from. There's actually an expectation that there will be some people who aren't going to know anything about the benefit improvement until all of a sudden they get their check in January and they go, why did I get an extra 20,000? Should I call somebody, or maybe should I just keep quiet about? Yes. We fully expect that, because a lot of them, it's all direct deposit now. And so that, how to reach retirees has been a challenge both for us and DRS, because as a board, the only way we get addresses for our newsletter mailings is by getting them from DRS. So our data is only as good as theirs when it comes to reaching retirees.
Any other comments on relationships or what this board would be doing? I mean, we lost Representative Bergquist, and if Senator Holy's still on the line, I'd invite other opportunities that should be taken with regards to the legislature. It was commented a couple of times in terms of the strengths of the relationships, both that the board has built credibility through its process over time. The stakeholder organizations all have very good relationships that have been of a benefit to this board. Are there other elements there? And Mr. Chair, Wolf has his hand up.
Go ahead, Wolf. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Just reflecting on the discussion, one thing that occurs to me is that there's so much good and so much strength in the decentralized nature of our system, spread across SIB and their role, Pension Funding Council, DRS, ourselves, others. But one of the challenges that brings is knowing who is best equipped to be able to say with authority what is happening. And I raise this because I think as we talk about relationships, not just among those entities, but to reaching out beyond to other groups, what do we need to do to properly equip them so that when they speak with others about left to. When they speak with others about the pension system generally, they're able to say with confidence what they're saying, and that what's in the packet that they're given and in the information that they're given, that's been vetted sufficiently so that they can communicate it to others. Because these are consequential communications in some instances, in many instances, with members about their benefits, about how to obtain them, who to talk with. And again, I just raised the concern, if you will, that we think not just in terms of asking and inspiring others to communicate more, but that we think about what we need to do to pack their parachutes for them so that it's a parachute, not a laundry bag, when it comes time for them to have to be able to say something with authority and be able to communicate for us.
Thanks, Wolf.
All righty, I'm not seeing any other hands for this topic. So let's move to the third one, which had just started to raise its head a little bit. The benefits discussion. Of course, you know, the original strategic plan was largely built around the first primary goal, which was enhancing the benefits for the members. And as Pat brought up even beforehand, with the discussion of 790, that focus from the get-go had always been on, you know, a big benefit improvement, largely the multiplier. And you know, from the current strategic plan, you have, you know, as a primary goal, enhancing the benefits for the members, with objectives of, you know, adding benefits that are affordable, and you know, what at the time was identifying viable alternative revenue sources for benefit enhancements, which was a key focus when this plan was written. You know, the question had been brought up, you know, figuring out where do we go next and how do you manage those expectations? I know that was brought up by several folks. You know, Jay brought up the necessity, though, of staying on point with the fiduciary responsibility of, you know, that two-hat problem, as far as making sure that the focus is in the right place in terms of managing the benefits, you know, properly for the members, which of course is key to the mission in terms of responsibly managing the plan. And then again, not being complacent, because there's a risk of, you know, perception, if you will, from the membership or from other bodies. So when you're thinking about benefits moving forward, interestingly, the conversation last month wasn't, we need to focus on this benefit, and this benefit. But I guess I'll invite, what do you see as over the next 2 years, the couple most important things for moving forward on this topic? What does the board need to accomplish in the next couple of fiscal years to move this forward?
Go ahead, Mark.
I think really what makes it all happen is adequate, stable contribution rates. So I think that's something we've been doing for a long, long time, and it's key to any kind of a benefit improvement, no matter how many people that benefit improvement affects. If you don't have, if your plan isn't properly funded and the rates are jumping up and down like they used to, that was always the problem. And we never had enough money. The plan never had enough money when plan needed money, because it was monkeying around with contribution rates. I know it took me a long time to learn that was a big issue for the employers, because they're budgeting, right? And that's just goes with the world of the employer, is being able to budget and making sure that the contribution rates are adequate and stable. So I'm not proposing anything different. I'm just looking back and saying that has been a key to success and in terms of communicating benefits. I don't know, maybe the board could put up something as simple as a score sheet over the last 20 plus years. Here's how many benefit improvements the board has proposed to the legislature, and here's the percentage. You don't even have to get into the minutia of what all those benefit improvements are, because there are a lot of them, and just say, you know, the board's at 91% or 96% of all the suggestions or bills that have been introduced or come through the purview of the board, and this is how many have passed. And maybe that is enough to get people to think, or at least from the, you don't want to give people too much information, right? And you could say, look, this is what we've been doing, and this is how successful the board has been with all the different partners, because when it comes to the legislative process, that's very complicated in and of itself. But I think that for the vast majority of them, the fire commissioners, the counties, the city organizations, they haven't really objected to any of those. Maybe a few, I mean, over the course, they probably had their ideas about it, but I think that's something as simple as 92%. Maybe that could go on the website, the board's website when it comes to legislation. If people have questions about that, that's great. They can ask questions and then get their answers.
Do you see, say, that kind of information, do you see that as an important part of, we'll call it laying the groundwork for that next change? Is that we're communicating in terms of how that fits in, that credibility aspect and
the credibility and the historic success of what the board's been doing for all these years? I think it will inspire confidence in people and hopefully even inspire people to become more active and a little bit more educated. 96%, that sounds like a lot. Well, what does that mean? And how did it happen? And that sounds pretty good to me. How can I participate in that level of success?
Patrick?
I guess this runs into, I'm going to put them together again. Operational integrity benefits are one and the same, and it reflects just like you see on the state investment board. The idea is they have a structure, they have built a structure, they do not deviate from their game plan of what they have, and they move forward. Same thing with the benefits and what what we're here for. What you stated before is we're here for the enhancement of benefits for Plan 2 members and make sure that it's affordable and reasonable. And in that response, with what we have done, what we want to do in the future, it all is based on our operational integrity to be able to provide these benefits rationally and intelligently and to be able to explain ourselves to the legislature on why these things need to happen and to have the buy-in from the employers as well as the employees to move it forward. So asking, okay, what's the next line of benefits? That is something that the board is going to have to talk about at retreats or something like that we come together on and say, okay, this is what we need to push to. But that's where the operational of the integrity of the board comes together, because we can't be manipulated by one group fighting for something that it doesn't help all the groups. And so sometimes you got to give a little to get to where you need. And I think that's what we've done here again. So all these four things are wrapped in, but I think the biggest thing that we spent the most time on is the communications, because if you have the good communications, it's going to help the relationships, and the relationships are what builds on the operational integrity and increases the benefits if we can get there. So not to try and wrap up what you're doing, but I said, when you mentioned benefits, I'm going, where are we going to go with this? So, okay.
You're so subtle.
So thank you for my little dissertation. I'm hanging up now.
Well, and let me ask you, Pat, because one of the things you brought up in the SWOT analysis was the identification of benefits. And you're somewhat speaking to that. And it was interesting when you brought up what I'll more broadly classify as the mental health issue. And I know in my other roles, particularly with the International Foundation, that our board of directors had a large discussion that's going to be that has been, but it's going to continue to be one of the major educational themes from the foundation side. I think another piece of that is going to also stem from financial wellness, which also will many times, because of financial stress, ties to to mental health issues. And even though those aren't directly left Plan 2 pension benefits, and there may or may not be. I mean, we've touched on things like the PTSD and whatnot, but is the understanding of those issues and even you spending time, whether it's communicating or informing related to those issues, those are things that can impact how people value the pension plan. Do you see that as part of the benefits discussion in terms of identifying issues? Or is it really the focus on, no, what are the plan changes? What is in that scope of control? How does the board, as the trustees, where's that scope of role? Do you see it given your strategic initiatives?
I think there's some overlap. I mean, clearly with the stakeholders, I mean, whether it be, WACOPS or state council, if we have an idea, we have the discussion, we meet with people here and we say, probably best that we run that through, through the organization on the outside. And so we've had some victories. PTSD is an example. We worked closely with WACOPS and, we were successful, but it doesn't necessarily resonate or show up right here in this discussion, right? Looking at Steve, making sure he's agreeing with me, and we have that discussion. And so I think there's victory for the groups on the outside. There's a victory in here and it's shared. I'm not sure. I don't know if our members, I don't want to say don't care who gets the work done. They just want to see work being done. And they want it to be better than it is, today, whatever that looks like. And I'm with Pat. I don't know the benefit piece where we're going to be. I do know that we'll have some conversations. I think we've made it very clear. I know WACOPS and everybody in this room has talked about not being complacent, but being responsible, having our professionalism, being recognizing our strengths as a board, our fiduciary responsibility, and then evaluating where we're going to go as far as our benefits in the future. I don't know what they look like right now. I'd just be happy to have the 86-year-old person be able to open their internet. That's all I really want. Go ahead.
When Pat mentioned that earlier, I took down a couple of notes because he was coming at it from a different perspective that I thought was interesting. To the extent that we have examined these types of topics in the past, it's always been the focus from the perspective of what's the impact on the plan. So when you talk about I think your increased workload for police and fire, we would look at it in terms of, wow, you guys are working a ton of overtime. Does that create a risk for inflating benefits in the plan? And kind of look at it from a monetary perspective. We have members who are leaving their work because they've got a medical condition, PTSD. Is that covered? And that'll be like the focus of the benefits is, okay, if that's work related, if the PTSD is related to their work, then it should be treated the same as any other worker injury. And but again, it's coming from that purely financial pension math perspective. We've got a lot of people we've got a lot of turnover. Does that create a mathematical risk for the plan? That different perspective of what, if anything, can actually be done through the pension plan to help people while they're still working, maybe to help reduce that turnover or reduce the need for all of the overtime. I don't know. I know, for instance, one example of is, are they covered if they need to take time off? Will that be an authorized leave of absence? Are we hearing of places where somebody is requesting time off or having to take time off and somehow that's not being approved? That might be, but that perspective of what is there to help them really has never been explored from a pension perspective. That's always been more employer HR, or to the extent that the unions feel that the employer HR is not following through appropriately, it comes from them. But that's a great area to at least have some dialogue to see, is there something else there for lack of a better word, pension related. So that we will be doing some brainstorming on that, Pat.
Any other comments on benefits? Okay, I think we will move on since we have just about 10 minutes left on this topic to the final item, which is operational integrity. And from here, so some of the notes that I had made, in terms of was a lot about the formation of the board, the way the board operates, the way the board communicates, the success that the board has had. Mark, you had mentioned in terms of how well the board works because we have everybody, at the table. It was also mentioned that because we have bipartisan representation from the legislature, that's certainly a strength that we have Jason had mentioned in terms of how we have a methodology in place where he can ask anybody on the board or on the staff questions when we have a communications method for that. But on the operational integrity, Jay, the one that I know we've been talking a lot about was you'd mentioned growing the trustee education, and part of that is knowledge of what other plans and systems are doing. Anything you want to expand on that, given your experience just at the International Foundation?
No, I think you kind of hit it. I mean, I think my comment was just around making sure that, we don't stand still as a board in terms of our education and our understanding of what else is out there, what other plans are doing, what are the industry trends, what do those look like, so that again we can be strategic and continue to think strategically as a group.
I don't see any hands up right now. From the operational standpoint, I know, Mark, you'd brought up the board span of control with particular focus on staff. Is there anything you want to discuss there with the board?
I think we've had some of those conversations in the past, and it's always it's always rankled me that the board doesn't have the ability to set salaries for all the staff, because this is not a general fund financed operation. And so I get that there are complexities to it. We've had some sort of offline conversations about that. So it's always good for me to have that conversation, to listen to what the experts in the legislature have to say, and Steve's experience with other state agencies and the way that the whole salary schedule is set for state employees. But it's, I get it. Whether I agree with it or not isn't really the point. I guess it's trying to do the best that we could possibly do to manage that to the benefit of the board. And I think we have an obligation, a fiduciary responsibility to manage that in a way that allows us to recruit and keep very good people who do a technical job. And I think it's to the extent that we can manage that, I think that the board should be focused on doing that. Is that responsive, Tim?
For me, but anybody else from the board that has a comment on that?
Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just about every good governance seminar or process that I've been through in the last 4 to 5 years, one of the things that they really tend to emphasize on is board infrastructure, and specifically what Mark had brought up is retention and recruitment. So I'll speak in support of what Mark said. Is as he said, there are complexities, but it would be helpful to explore some of those directions where we could go for recruitment and retention. but also next steps. What we haven't talked about is what happens when Steve says, hey, I would really like to retire. And what that looks like. So those are things that I think that we don't necessarily talk a lot about, for obvious reasons, but we certainly don't want to wait until somebody decides, hey, I'm kind of ready to go, and then not have a really solid infrastructure for that. So kind of that succession training or succession planning, I think it's something that we looked at. We may have talked about it, and I just don't remember. But I do recall in my last training that was talked to extensively, and I thought to myself, I don't recall really having those discussions with the board as far as a plan and what that looks like. So, does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Jason and other board members, do you guys see that as a topic for the whole board? Like, for instance, like an informational briefing on the salary setting structure, both for the board in Washington and kind of the succession planning and recruitment retention rolled into that?
I do.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful, sure, for everybody.
Yeah, okay, we can get that plan on that for that's great direction, because now we can anticipate that'll be one of those things we bring back to you for your work plan next year, and we'll be prepared for it.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I mean, two themes that definitely have stood out that affect the operational integrity is one, just that credibility, and that largely comes from both what we've been doing and the communications that the board has. But there is that there was a comment. Let me see here. There was I think Pat had made a comment about how the board process helps show the bigger picture of the whole process. And I think that that's part of the understanding that can come out of that. I think you just demonstrated that there's opportunities to improve the operational integrity through additional education. So are there other topics that you think are important for the board to be educated on? Obviously, succession planning can be something that can be, that can be a session that we talk about, or, just how some of the state systems operate. Are there other items out there that this board, feels, anybody on the board that, you want to have more information about or knowledge about in terms of the pension structure or anything else that could improve your operational integrity?
I got one thing, Tim. As new board members come on, I can reflect on my own experience coming onto the board. When I came on, I think 6 years ago, maybe something like that, everybody on the board had a very strong operational understanding of all the entities we deal with, such as this morning, the WSIB, or whether it's the actuary, or if it's all the different entities that we deal with. I think that as new people come on, I don't know what everybody's understanding is now as board members, but maybe something that gives a quick informational overview of what those external entities are and what they do. I can remember my first board meeting and Lisa Wan giving a presentation, and just getting your head wrapped around that as far as who Lisa was, what the actuary is, why we use the state actuary, all those things. And that may be in the new members packet. It's been a while since I've seen that, but that's, as you said, that I'm always looking for ways to improve, especially for board education. I think that might be one if it's not in the board packet. Like I said, it may be. Thank you.
Yeah, Jason, I think that was a question that came up from board members a lot or a comment that came up from board members who'd been around for a while, when they were asked on the survey, the expectation survey, the specific question about bringing new members up to speed, most of the time they said, well, we don't really know how that's going because you're not a new member anymore. That follow up with new members after they've been on board for a while anyway, and getting feedback from them about how that process worked and could have worked better, and then getting some kind of report back to the board about that is one of the changes we plan on implementing. And to your specific question, yeah, the organizational structure is still a part of the onboarding process, an important part.
Yeah, because I remember like with the last salary structure, deal with OFM and all the intricacies that came up with that. And I remember talking to Dennis and just getting my head wrapped around that component, because as Pat mentioned, I thought at that point we were our own entity, and then became strongly disappointed realizing that no, we had other things that we had to deal with in order to set those structures. So it was a pretty steep learning curve. Not to say that I wasn't aware or made aware through training documents, but it was a pretty steep learning curve for somebody who had not been exposed to all those various entities. And again, if somebody else wants to speak up, maybe we don't need to do that. It's just I'm just throwing it out there just for the topic of discussion.
Okay, well, we have hit the end of our scheduled time for this discussion. I guess the only other real question now is from a next steps standpoint. What does the board want, staff to do with this information? A lot of discussion, some specific things were mentioned that I think are actionable types of items. What do you want us to do to follow up with you next, where in terms of improving the strategic plan, formalizing? What would you like back from us?
Is your thought you're going to put it into a draft? And then, I mean, obviously you've got all the notes right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm questioning. What I'm asking is you want recommendations? Do you want, the summary of some of these things that we've heard? I mean, you want us to go through the strategic plan and maybe make some recommendations, or do you want us to work with you? I'm just looking for direction on how you want to take this information that next step. But what's your expectation for your strategic plans? I want to make sure we incorporate it properly.
Good, Jake.
I think a great starting point, Tim, would be if you could maybe bring us some recommendations based on all these conversations. Do you see a pathway, some actions for board consideration? I think that'd be a good place to start from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Yeah. Excellent. We will do some work on that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everybody's input on the conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your work.
Yeah, I'd also like to express my appreciation for your engagement on this topic. There was a lot of very helpful feedback from our perspective, so thank you very much.
All right, number 6 on the agenda is the 2023 meeting calendar adoption. We've had this out. It was like last month. We put it out just to make it available for everyone. And yes. I don't believe you've heard any comments.
Have not heard any comments back regarding conflicts or concerns with the schedule.
And would we handle the August meeting in July like we normally do, thereabouts, right? I know we have it down. We usually don't.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got it on the calendar, and if you decide at some point you no longer need it, then we would cancel it for you.
Right. Good.
Mr. Chair, can I make a motion to accept the calendar?
Thank you. Second. Motion's made and seconded to adopt the 2023 board meeting calendar. Is there discussion, comments? Not seeing anything. All those in favor of adoption, say aye.
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 Opposed? Calendar is adopted. Thank you very much. All right, number 6 on the agenda is the administrative update. Mr. Nelson.
We've already talked about Tim attending the Washington Fire Commissioners Conference last month. We also, I wanted to mention, we had several board members, thank you, who attended the IFEBP annual conference or the NCPERS Public Safety Conference. Representative Berquist gave a very well received presentation at IFEBP on how to communicate with legislators. And that's the second time you've done that presentation. So that, I think one, it says a lot to for how you guys, like to your point, Jay, you take your jobs seriously. And from my perspective, I appreciate that. Also, the idea that board members and board staff are sought out as speakers, as knowledgeable experts in a lot of these fields says a lot about how well you guys have done your job. You're one of the most successful plans in the country, and that gets a lot of positive attention. The only other item I wanted to remind you is the December meeting has been canceled. So the next meeting of the board is January 18th. You just adopted that a minute ago, in case you weren't familiar with that. And 2 items that had been previously scheduled for the December meeting, annual update from the Department of Retirement Systems and a presentation on the results of the state audit, the annual financial audit. Those were moved to January at the request of those presenters. So typically the January meeting would be more of a what's going on with session and an admin update, but this January meeting will be a little bit different because you'll also have these 2 informational items.
All right.
With that,
is it your plan we'll do another hybrid meeting in person as well, or?
Yes, we had talked about the possibility of, changing the location of the hybrid meetings in the past. We did those, pretty much from home last session. But we've decided that for technology reasons and others, it just makes sense to continue to use the SIB boardroom. So we will continue to do hybrid and do them here. And that will be the case for the January meeting.
Number 7 on our list. Is there anything else? I'm sorry. Any other questions for Steve? Anybody on that update? So number 7 on the list was a possible executive session, which we will be doing. So the board is going to convene to an executive session to review the performance of a public employee. Board will resume the open public regular board meeting, and we're going to say at 12:10. That'll give us about 32 minutes. That'll allow us, Tim, to move our people who are online, move us into another room. For those who are on virtual watching in, we're not anticipating any action when we come back.
Other than adjournment.
Than an adjournment. So you're free. I feel very comfortable saying you're not going to miss anything. So Tor, you stay on. You're not getting out of it that easy. So
I'm here. That was very well said, Mr. Chair. Good job.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for writing it for me. So, all right. So we will be, we'll go ahead and convene to our executive session. So. All right, so we have completed our agenda for November 16th. Is there any other action before this group? Seeing no other action, I would entertain
Move to adjourn.
a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.
Jessica, I'm sending you some paper.
Happy holidays, everyone. We'll see everyone in January. All right, thank you.